Across Europe, many countries are experimenting with shorter 4-day work weeks in order to boost productivity and improve work-life balance. Greece, however, is moving in the opposite direction. This week, its parliament passed a controversial labour bill allowing for 13-hour workdays, following last year's introduction of 6-day working weeks in certain industries. This move sparked nationwide strikes and fierce criticism, especially given that, contrary to the stereotype, Greeks already work some of the longest hours in the entire EU. So in this video, we'll break down Greece's recent labour reforms and explain why the idea that simply working harder than everyone else will drive an economic recovery is unlikely to succeed. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. Let's start with some context. In the 1970s, following the fall of the junta, successive Greek governments relied heavily on borrowing. And by the time that Greece joined the Eurozone in 2001, its debt had already reached 97% of GDP, one of the highest figures in the world at the time. The drop in borrowing costs after Greece joined the euro encouraged its governments to borrow more, and its debt-to-GDP ratio was above 100% when the global financial crisis hit in 2008. Credit markets then froze up, triggering a sovereign debt crisis that, combined with the ruthless austerity imposed on Greece by the IMF and the EU, ruined the Greek economy for over a decade. Despite multiple bailouts, Greek GDP collapsed by over 25% between 2009 and 2014. The unemployment rate reached a staggering 28%, its debt burden continued to rise to over 200% of GDP, and its GDP per capita remained well below pre-crisis levels. However, in the past couple of years, the Greek economy has staged what looks like a tentative comeback. Between 2021 and 2024, Greece's economic growth outpaced the euro area average, helping Greece to reduce its debt-to-GDP ratio from 209.4% in 2020 to 163.9% in 2023. These stats gave way to headlines about how Greece was finally back, and were touted as proof that the austere reforms imposed on Greece during the 2010s were paying off, albeit behind schedule. But dig into the figures, and it quickly becomes clear that most of this growth has actually come mainly from labour-intensive sectors like tourism, hospitality, and food services, which has dragged down average productivity, and with it, average wages. A recent study by LSE titled Greece's Cafe Economy found that between 2009 and 2023, employment in tourism-related industries rose 87%, while gross value added by those industries grew by only 11%. Meaning that more people were working for relatively less output. Over the same time period, labour productivity fell by 16%, and real wages collapsed by 26 to 35%, with declines reaching 60% in tourism. Wages were dragged down further by wage freezes, cuts to the minimum wage, and a weakening of collective bargaining agreements, all conditions part of the austerity measures implemented by international creditors. Today, wages in Greece are among the lowest in the EU, and the country also has the highest proportion of low-wage earners in the bloc. Low wages mean that Greeks have to work extraordinarily long hours to make ends meet. According to OECD data, Greeks ranked 5th worldwide in terms of annual working hours in 2023, behind only Colombia, Mexico, Costa Rica, and Chile. In fact, 1 in 5 Greeks works more than 45 hours a week, the highest rate in the European Union, according to Eurostat data published earlier this month. Despite these long hours, a 2024 report by the European Committee of Social Rights found that nearly half of households can't afford basic necessities, and the country is second to last in the EU when it comes to purchasing power. And those who don't take on extra work have left the country entirely in search of better job opportunities and wages, which has left a severely depleted working population in the country. From 2021 to 2022, over 1 million working-age people left the country. Of that total number, over 796,000 left during the years of the economic crisis, and more than 283,000 after the crisis had ended. This massive exodus of people, combined with a fertility rate of just 1.3, one of the lowest in Europe, means that by 2070, Greece's population could shrink by as much as 25%, way above the EU average of 4%, which in turn will put a massive strain on the Greek welfare state. Since coming into power in 2019, the centre-right government led by Prime Minister Mitsotakis has sought to tackle Greece's chronic productivity slump and labour shortages. To do so, it has overhauled the labour market with reforms aimed at boosting flexibility, modernising work regulations, and bringing undeclared labour into the formal economy. His government introduced a digital labour card to monitor working hours and overtime, raised the minimum wage several times, though increases haven't kept pace with inflation, expanded parental leave, formally recognised remote work and the right to disconnect, and reduced social security contributions to make hiring cheaper for employers. In 2024, Greece also implemented a 6-day working week for certain industries, allowing employees to work up to 48 hours a week instead of 40, with a 40% wage premium on the 6th day. Then, just last week, Parliament approved another bill, the Fair Work for All law, which authorises 13-hour workdays in limited circumstances. This measure caps overtime at 150 hours per year, or roughly 37 days annually, meaning that the standard 40-hour week technically still applies. The reform is largely aimed at the services and tourism sectors, allowing employees to extend hours during the busy summer season instead of hiring additional staff. But this bill is contentious to say the least. Supporters argue that the change will benefit workers by ensuring that they're properly compensated for overtime that already happens informally. But unions, left-wing opposition lawmakers, and labour groups strongly disagree. In response, Greece was gripped by nationwide strikes last week as unions demanded the bill's withdrawal, with critics pointing to two main problems. First, labour experts warn that the law effectively legalises overwork and labour violations, turning widespread unpaid overtime into state-sanctioned exploitation rather than addressing its root causes, namely weak collective bargaining and stagnant wages. Second, while the Labour Minister insists that no one can be forced to work 13-hour days or be fired for refusing, in practice, enforcement is minimal. Greece has weak workplace inspection systems and a limited tradition of labour oversight, leaving workers vulnerable to dismissal under the pretext of low productivity. So, will a 6-day working week actually help the Greek economy? While it might create some nominal increase in GDP and maybe tax intake, the evidence suggests that it's probably not a great idea, all things considered. First, long hours increase the risk of burnout and health problems, which in the long run will weaken the workforce and reduce productivity rather than improving it. Second, harsher working conditions are likely to drive even more young people abroad in search of better pay and work-life balance, worsening Greece's ongoing brain drain, and will probably also make it harder for families to have children, exacerbating the demographic crisis. In this light, perhaps the Greek government would be better off focusing on improving productivity rather than just getting Greeks to work ever longer hours. Before you go, we've just announced our new coffee table book, Assembly Required, a 300-page book which highlights 27 of the world's most beautiful parliament buildings, from the classics like the British Parliament in Westminster, to the US Capitol or the Hungarian Parliament, to ones you might not expect, like New Zealand, Bhutan or Bangladesh. For each parliament, we don't just show beautiful photos of these actually incredible buildings. We also tell you the stories behind the buildings, both through passages written by our team, as well as through detailed custom-designed floor plans and diagrams. We really did spend a long time on this too. We spent ages digging into the stories of parliament buildings all around the world, before narrowing it down to just the most interesting and beautiful buildings, writing tens of thousands of words to tell you their stories. We've also made both desk and wall calendars based on Assembly Required too, allowing you to experience these beautiful buildings year-round. Both are also double-sided, providing tons of bonus images for you to enjoy. If you're interested, you can click the link in the description to find out more. Plus, there's a whole load of bundles available if you want a good deal. Plus, if you do want a copy, then you can get 15% off anything Assembly Required by using the code ASSEMBLY. That code only lasts for this week, so if you're interested, now's your time. Anyway, this is just another way that you can help fund our journalism. So if you are interested, then your support will help us to continue investing in our journalism, as well as providing free content for years to come. So as always, thank you very much.